Long-term relationships create long-term wealth. Most of the wealthiest people you admire didn't get rich from a single brilliant deal. They got rich because someone picked up the phone when they called, and then picked it up again and again. Over years, over decades, but you've probably been taught the opposite. You've been taught that wealth comes from hustle, from closing, from finding the next opportunity, the next client, the next viral moment. You've been taught that speed wins. That urgency is a virtue, that if you're not pushing, you're falling behind. And here's the cost of that belief. You burn through people. You extract value from every interaction. You pitch before you listen. You follow up only when you need something. And then one day, you look around and realize you've met 1,000 people and you have no one to call. No one who trusts you. No one who would recommend you without being asked. No one who would say, I know exactly the person you need. Let me introduce you. That's not a networking failure. That's a relationship failure. And it's the single most expensive failure in business because everything you want, every deal, every partnership, every opportunity flows through relationships. Not websites, not funnels, not algorithms. Relationships. So let me tell you what nobody in the grow fast world wants to admit. The people who build durable wealth are not the best closers. They're the best relationship builders. And there's a mechanism behind why that works. A mechanism rooted in how your brain processes trust, how compounding actually operates in human networks, and why most people systematically destroy the very thing that would make them wealthy. Let's start with the mistake almost everyone makes. When most people hear build relationships, they think networking, they think business cards, they think LinkedIn connections, they think, I should go to more events and meet more people. That's not relationship building, that's contact accumulation, and contact accumulation is nearly worthless. Here's why. Your brain doesn't process contacts the way a CRM does. Your brain processes relationships through repeated, consistent, emotionally coherent interactions. Every time you interact with someone, your brain is running a background calculation, not consciously, but neurologically, asking, is this person safe? Is this person consistent? Does what they say match what they do? Can I predict their behavior? That calculation happens in the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex simultaneously. The amygdala is scanning for threat, for inconsistency, for signals that something is off. The prefrontal cortex is evaluating long-term patterns. Is this person reliable over time? And when both systems converge on, yes, something very specific happens, your brain lowers its defensive filtering. It opens up. It becomes willing to share information, to take risks, to make introductions, to invest trust. That process doesn't happen in one meeting. It doesn't happen in one impressive pitch. It doesn't even happen in 5 meetings. It happens through what neuroscience calls repeated co-regulation, multiple interactions where both parties experience emotional predictability and mutual respect. Over time, without shortcuts. So when someone tells you to just network more, they're telling you to skip the mechanism. They're telling you to accumulate surface-level contacts while hoping trust magically appears. It doesn't. Trust is manufactured slowly, through consistency, and it compounds, but only if you don't break the chain. And most people break the chain. They break it by disappearing when they don't need something. They break it by showing up only when they want a favor. They break it by being one person on the call and another person behind the scenes. Every inconsistency, every gap between what you project and what you do gets registered. Not consciously, neurologically, the amygdala keeps score even when the prefrontal cortex has moved on. So here's the core judgment, and I want you to sit with this. Your network is not your net worth. Your trusted network is your net worth, and the distance between those two things is enormous. Anyone can have a network. A network is just a list. A trusted network is a living system of people who would vouch for you, refer you, invest in you, and collaborate with you, not because you asked, but because they've experienced enough consistency from you to feel safe doing so. That's the asset, that's the thing that compounds, and almost nobody builds it intentionally. Let me explain why this works at the level of the brain, because if you understand the mechanism, you'll never approach relationships casually again. There's a system in your brain called the reticular activating system, the RAS. It's essentially your brain's filter for what matters. Your brain receives millions of pieces of information every second, and the RAS decides what gets through to your conscious awareness. It filters based on what you've told your brain is important, through your focus, your emotions, your repeated attention. Here's what's relevant. When someone trusts you, when you've built a genuine relationship with someone, you get installed into their RAS. Not literally, but functionally. They start noticing opportunities that relate to you. They hear a conversation at dinner and think, that sounds like something Leon could help with. They see a job posting and think, I know exactly who should apply for this. They encounter a problem and your name surfaces, not because you marketed to them, but because you've been consistently present in their experience with enough positive emotional weight that their brain flags you as relevant. That's what attraction actually means when you strip away the mystical language. It's not the universe sending you signals. It's other people's brains filtering for you because you've earned a position in their attention system. And you earned that position not through a single impressive moment, but through repeated, emotionally consistent interactions over time. Now think about what that means at scale. If you have 5 people who trust you deeply, you have 5 active RAS filters working on your behalf, scanning the world for opportunities you'll never see yourself. If you have 50, you have 50. If you have 500, genuinely trusted, not just LinkedIn connected, you have a distributed intelligence network that no marketing budget can replicate. That's not a metaphor. That's the mechanism. That's why Warren Buffett can make billion-dollar deals over lunch. Not because he's the smartest analyst, though he is brilliant, but because he's spent 60 years building such deep trust with a specific network of people that opportunities flow to him before they hit the open market. His reputation is an installed program in hundreds of other people's RAS filters, and he never breaks the chain. Now let me layer on something from a framework I think about constantly, one shaped by Naval Ravikant's thinking on wealth and leverage. Naval makes a crucial distinction that most people miss. He talks about specific knowledge, the unique combination of skills, experience, and insight that can't be easily replicated or taught. And he talks about leverage, the tools that let you multiply your output without multiplying your input, capital, code, media, and people. But here's what I think Naval implies but doesn't always make explicit. Your specific knowledge is worthless if nobody knows you have it. And knowing you have it doesn't mean seeing your resume. It means having experienced your judgment, your reliability, your consistency, and your character over time. It means trust. Think about it this way. There are millions of talented people in the world, millions of people with genuine expertise, but most of them are invisible, not because they lack skill, but because they lack trusted relationships with the people who could deploy their skill. They have specific knowledge, but no distribution channel for it. And in human systems, the distribution channel for specific knowledge is trust. This is also where Charlie Munger's mental model of inversion becomes incredibly useful. Instead of asking, how do I get more clients? Or how do I get more opportunities? Invert the question, what is destroying my relationships? What am I doing that erodes trust? What patterns am I repeating that make people less likely to call me back? Most people, if they're honest, will find the answer immediately. They're inconsistent. They follow up only when they need something. They overpromise and underdeliver. They talk about themselves more than they listen. They treat relationships as transactions. I give you something, you give me something, we're done. And here's the brutal truth that Munger's inversion reveals. You don't need to be great at building relationships. You need to stop being bad at it. Most of the damage is self-inflicted. Most of the trust erosion is preventable. If you simply stop doing the things that make people distrust you, the natural human tendency toward connection and cooperation would do the rest. Remove the friction, and trust builds itself, but you have to stop breaking it first. Now here's where this gets really interesting, and where I want to connect this to how compounding actually works, not in a financial spreadsheet, but in human networks. You've heard the idea that compound interest is the most powerful force in wealth building. And that's true for money, but it's even more true for relationships, because relationship compounding has a property that financial compounding doesn't. It's nonlinear and multidirectional. When your money compounds, it grows in one dimension, more money. When a relationship compounds, it grows in multiple dimensions simultaneously. A trusted relationship can produce referrals, introductions, collaborations, knowledge, emotional support, strategic advice, and market intelligence, all from the same relationship, all at the same time, all without you asking for any of it. But, and this is critical, relationship compounding only works if you don't withdraw too early. Just like compound interest in finance, the magic happens in the later years, not the early ones. The first year of a relationship, you're just establishing baseline trust. The second year, you're proving consistency. The third year, you're becoming someone they think of automatically. By year 5, you're embedded. By year 10, you're family. Most people never get past year 1. They meet someone, have a good interaction, maybe follow up once or twice, and then move on to the next shiny opportunity. They're constantly resetting the compounding clock to 0. They're making deposits and immediately withdrawing them. They never let the interest accumulate. And this connects directly to something I read in the Talmudic tradition of commerce, which I find endlessly applicable. The idea that a contract, an agreement between people, is not just a legal instrument. It's a covenant. It's a declaration of mutual commitment that exists beyond the transaction itself. In Talmudic business philosophy, breaking a verbal agreement is considered a character failure, not just a business mistake, because the agreement isn't about the deal. It's about the relationship the deal represents. When you approach every interaction as a covenant rather than a transaction, something shifts. You stop calculating what you can extract. You start asking what you can contribute. You stop measuring relationships by their immediate return. You start measuring them by their trajectory, and that shift from transactional to covenantal is the single biggest unlock in long-term wealth building. I'm not saying this to be idealistic. I'm saying this because it works. The data is clear. The neuroscience is clear. The biographical evidence from every durable fortune in history is clear. People who treat relationships as long-term covenants outperform people who treat them as short-term transactions, not by a little. By orders of magnitude, because they're compounding while everyone else is resetting. Let me talk now about something that most relationship advice completely ignores, and it's the reason why even well-intentioned people fail at this. Building long-term relationships is a skill. It's not a personality trait. It's not something you either have or you don't. It's a skill that can be developed through deliberate practice, but only if you practice the right components. And here's where I need to be honest about something. Most people practice the wrong things. They practice their pitch. They practice their handshake. They practice their elevator speech. They practice being charismatic. None of that is wrong exactly, but none of it is the skill that actually matters. The skill that matters is this: the ability to make the other person feel understood, not impressed, not entertained, not sold to, understood. When someone feels genuinely understood by you, their brain releases oxytocin, the neurochemical associated with bonding and trust. Their cortisol drops, their defensive systems quiet down. Their prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational evaluation, becomes more active relative to their amygdala. In plain language, they shift from guarded to open, from skeptical to curious, from evaluating you to collaborating with you. And the way you make someone feel understood isn't by talking, it's by listening, but not passive listening, not sitting there nodding while you wait for your turn to speak. Active, structured listening where you reflect back what someone said, ask follow-up questions that go deeper, and demonstrate that you've internalized their concern, their goal, their fear, their context. This is trainable. It's as trainable as any other skill, but it requires what Anders Ericsson, the researcher behind the science of expert performance, called deliberate practice. You need a clear target behavior, making the other person feel understood. You need to operate at the edge of your current ability, which means having conversations where you resist the urge to redirect to yourself. You need immediate feedback, which means paying attention to the other person's body language, their engagement level, their willingness to go deeper. And you need precise correction, which means adjusting your approach in real time based on what you observe. Most people have never practiced listening this way. They've had thousands of conversations, but they've never practiced conversation. There's an enormous difference. Just like you can play tennis for 20 years without improving if you never work on your backhand with intention, you can talk to people for 20 years without ever getting better at making them feel understood. Volume is not practice. Intentional repetition with feedback is practice. So here's the first capacity you need to build: structured, intentional listening. And you build it the way you build any skill, through focused repetition, at the edge of your comfort zone, with attention to feedback. The second capacity is consistency over time. And this one is harder, because it requires something most people don't have: a system. You need a system for staying in touch with people when you don't need anything from them. Not a CRM where you log contacts and set automated reminders to check in. That's mechanical and people can feel it. I mean a genuine practice of thinking about the people in your network, remembering what they told you matters to them, and reaching out with something relevant: an article, an introduction, a question, a congratulation, without any agenda. This is where most people fail, not because they don't care, but because they don't have the structure. They're reactive. They reach out when they need something. They go silent when they don't. And that pattern, reach out, go silent, reach out, go silent, is the exact pattern that erodes trust. Because what the other person experiences is, this person only contacts me when they want something. And once that pattern is established in someone's brain, it's very hard to override. The third capacity, and this one is subtle but powerful, is what I call value-forward positioning. It means that every time you interact with someone, you lead with value. Not value as in let me give you a free PDF. Value as in genuine insight, genuine help, genuine attention to their situation. Before you ask for anything, you've already given something. Before you pitch, you've already served. This isn't altruism, it's strategy, but it's strategy that aligns with how trust actually works. Remember the brain's background calculation. Is this person safe? Is this person consistent? Does what they say match what they do? When you lead with value consistently over time, you're answering all three questions positively. You're building a neurological case for trust that no pitch, no presentation, no marketing campaign can replicate. Let me give you a concrete scenario to make this real. Imagine you're a consultant, or a freelancer, or an independent professional of any kind. You meet a potential client at an industry conference. The conversation goes well. You exchange information. You can feel the possibility. Now here's what most people do. They send a follow-up email within 48 hours, pitch their services, maybe attach a case study or a proposal. The email is polished. The offer is clear, and nothing happens. The potential client doesn't respond, or responds politely but non-committally. The relationship dies before it starts. Why? because you jumped to the transaction before the relationship had any foundation. You tried to close before you'd earned the right to propose. The other person's amygdala registered your follow-up not as "this person wants to help me," but as "this person wants something from me," and the defensive filters went up. Now imagine the alternative. Same conference, same good conversation, but instead of pitching, you send a follow-up that says, "Great talking with you. You mentioned you were dealing with specific challenge they shared. I came across this article that addresses something similar, thought you might find it useful. No agenda, just thought of you." That's it, no pitch, no proposal, no call to action, just value. 2 weeks later, you see they posted something on LinkedIn. You leave a thoughtful comment, not "great post," but a genuine observation that shows you read and engaged with their thinking. A month later, you hear about someone in your network who might be a good connection for them. You make an introduction. Again, no agenda. 3 months in, they reach out to you, not because you asked. Because you've been building a neurological case for trust. You've been consistently present, consistently valuable, consistently safe. Their brain has done the math. Their RAS has flagged you. And now, when they have a need that matches your capability, your name surfaces naturally. That's not manipulation. That's how trust actually works. That's the mechanism. And the reason it works so much better than pitching is that it aligns with how the human brain processes credibility. You didn't tell them you were credible. You demonstrated it through behavior over time. And demonstrated credibility is the only credibility that sticks. Now multiply that by 20 relationships. 50, 100, each one built slowly, each one compounding, each one generating its own referrals and introductions. That's a wealth engine that doesn't require ads, doesn't require a massive social media following, doesn't require you to perform for strangers on the internet. It requires you to be genuinely, consistently valuable to a specific set of people over time. Here's another scenario that might hit closer to home. Imagine you're early in your career, or maybe you're pivoting, starting something new, entering a new industry, building a new kind of business. You don't have a track record. You don't have testimonials. You don't have a portfolio. What do you have? Most people in this position default to one of two strategies. Either they try to fake credibility, inflating their experience, name-dropping, projecting confidence they don't feel, or they compete on price, offering their services cheaply to get experience and exposure. Both strategies are destructive. Faking credibility triggers the other person's amygdala. Humans are remarkably good at detecting inauthenticity, even when they can't articulate what feels off. And competing on price attracts clients who value cheapness, not quality, clients who will never become long-term relationships because they'll leave the moment someone cheaper shows up. The alternative, and this is something I've come to believe deeply, is to compete on relationship quality. You may not have the biggest portfolio, you may not have the most experience, but you can be the person who listens most carefully, follows up most consistently, delivers most reliably, and gives value most generously. Those qualities are available to everyone. They don't require capital. They don't require credentials. They require intention and discipline. And here's the paradox. The people who compete on relationship quality end up building the strongest businesses because their clients don't leave. Their clients refer. Their clients become advocates. A client who trusts you deeply will forgive a mistake, give you constructive feedback, wait for you to improve, and defend you to others. A client who chose you on price will leave at the first hiccup. So if you're starting out and you're wondering how to compete, here's your answer. Don't compete on price, don't compete on features, compete on trust. And build that trust through the mechanism I've described: consistent presence, value-forward engagement, genuine listening, and covenantal commitment over time. Now I want to address something that I know some of you are thinking, because it's the objection I hear most often. This takes too long. I need results now. I can't wait 3 years for relationships to compound. I understand that feeling. I've felt it. But let me challenge it directly, because the feeling itself is part of the problem. When you feel urgency, when you feel like you need results right now, your brain shifts into a specific mode. Your cortisol rises, your prefrontal cortex gets partially suppressed, your amygdala becomes more dominant, and in that state you make worse decisions. You push too hard, you pitch too early, you take shortcuts that damage trust. You optimize for the short term at the expense of the long term. The urgency that you think is motivating you is actually sabotaging you. Naval Ravikant says something I come back to constantly: play long-term games with long-term people. That's not just strategic advice, it's neurological advice. When you commit to a long-term orientation, your brain calms down, your cortisol drops, your prefrontal cortex re-engages. You start making better judgments. You start seeing opportunities you missed when you were panicking. You start showing up differently in conversations, calmer, more present, more curious, more generous. And paradoxically, that calm, long-term orientation produces short-term results faster than the panicked, transactional approach, because people respond to it. People trust it. People want to work with someone who isn't desperate. So the answer to "this takes too long" is, yes, it takes time, but the alternative, transactional sprinting, doesn't just take time too. It takes time and produces nothing durable. You end up running on a treadmill, closing deals that don't repeat, building a client base that churns, and wondering why you feel exhausted and stuck. The compound curve of trust is slow at the beginning and explosive later. Just like financial compounding, the first 5 years feel like nothing is happening, and then, seemingly overnight, everything changes, but it only changes if you didn't quit during the slow years. If you didn't reset the clock by burning a relationship, if you didn't sacrifice the future for the present. Let me connect this to another framework that I think is essential. The idea from creativity research that creativity is not an individual trait, it's a system product. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who studied both creativity and flow, made a point that most people ignore. Creative breakthroughs almost never happen in isolation. They happen at the intersection of an individual, a domain of knowledge, and a field, a community of people who evaluate, validate, distribute, and build on ideas. In other words, your ideas are only as powerful as the network that receives them. An insight that stays in your head is not creative. A solution that nobody hears is not innovative. Creativity requires distribution. And in human systems, the distribution channel for ideas is, once again, relationships. This is why I say that sales, properly understood, is not separate from creativity. It's the second half of creativity. The first half is having the insight. The second half is getting it to the people who can use it. And getting it to those people requires trust, requires relationships, requires the kind of long-term, consistent presence that makes people willing to listen to you, take your ideas seriously, and act on them. If you have knowledge but no relationships, you have potential energy with no outlet. You have a battery that's never connected to anything. And potential energy that's never deployed is, functionally, zero energy. This is a hard truth, but it's a necessary one. Knowledge that doesn't reach the people who need it is not yet real knowledge. It becomes real when it enters the world through exchange, through conversation, through trust. And this is where I think the Talmudic insight about knowledge and commerce becomes incredibly relevant. In that tradition, knowledge is not abstract. Knowledge is meant to be applied, tested, exchanged, and refined through interaction with other people. A scholar who studies alone and never teaches, never applies, never engages in the marketplace of ideas, that scholar's knowledge is incomplete. Because knowledge that hasn't survived contact with reality hasn't been tested. And untested knowledge is just hypothesis. So when I talk about building long-term relationships, I'm not just talking about making friends. I'm talking about building the infrastructure through which your knowledge, your creativity, your specific value can actually reach the world. Without that infrastructure, you're brilliant in a vacuum, and vacuums don't pay. Now let me get practical, because understanding the mechanism is necessary but not sufficient. You also need to know what to do. So here's what I'd suggest you actually do this week, not next month, not when you're ready, but this week. First, identify 5 people in your existing network, not strangers, not new contacts, but people you already know who you've been inconsistent with, people you haven't reached out to in months. People you had a good connection with but let drift. Write their names down. Second, for each of those 5 people, think about what they told you mattered to them the last time you spoke. What were they working on? What were they worried about? What excited them? If you can't remember, that's data. It tells you something about how you've been showing up in conversations. Third, reach out to each of those 5 people this week with something valuable, and I don't mean your services. I mean an article relevant to their challenge, an introduction to someone who could help them, a question about how their project turned out, something that demonstrates you were listening and you remembered. Something that has zero agenda attached to it. Fourth, set a recurring weekly practice, 20 minutes, that's all, where you review the relationships you're building and ask yourself, who have I given value to this week without asking for anything? Who have I listened to deeply? Who have I been inconsistent with? This isn't a CRM exercise, it's a self-awareness practice. It's training your attention to notice the people who matter before you need them to matter. Fifth, start tracking the difference between your transactional contacts and your trusted relationships. Be honest with yourself. How many people in your network would vouch for you without hesitation? How many would refer you without being asked? If that number is small, that's not a failure. That's a starting point, and now you know exactly what to build. And here's a bonus practice, one that comes directly from the science of deliberate practice. After every significant conversation, every meeting, every call, every coffee, take 60 seconds to reflect. Ask yourself, did I make that person feel understood? Did I listen more than I spoke? Did I lead with value or did I lead with agenda? What would I do differently next time? That 60-second reflection, done consistently, will do more for your relationship skills than any networking book, any charisma course, any sales training program, because it creates the feedback loop that deliberate practice requires. Without reflection, you repeat your mistakes. With reflection, you refine your approach. And over time, refinement compounds just like trust, just like wealth. Let me address one more thing before I close, because I think it's important and it's often misunderstood. When I talk about building relationships for wealth, I'm not talking about being calculating. I'm not talking about keeping a ledger of favors given and favors owed. I'm not talking about fake generosity with hidden expectations. That approach is not only ethically bankrupt, it doesn't work. People can sense ulterior motives the way they can sense a change in temperature. Not always consciously, but the amygdala picks it up. And once someone's brain registers you as calculating, it's almost impossible to undo. What I'm talking about is genuine investment in other people's success. And not because you're a saint, because it's rational. If you genuinely help someone succeed, they become more capable, more resourced, more connected. And a more capable, more resourced, more connected person in your trusted network is exponentially more valuable to you and to themselves and to everyone they touch than someone you extracted a quick transaction from. This is what I mean when I say that creating wealth for others is the path to creating wealth for yourself. It's not a moral platitude. It's a structural observation about how value flows through human networks. Value flows toward trust. Trust flows toward consistency. Consistency flows toward people who genuinely care about the outcome for everyone involved, not just themselves. Naval says, earn with your mind, not your time. I'd extend that, earn with your relationships, not your transactions, because a transaction is a point, a relationship is a line, and a trusted network of relationships is a surface, a multi-dimensional space where opportunities, ideas, capital, and support can flow in any direction, at any time, without you having to chase any of it. I want to leave you with this, and I want you to actually think about it, not just hear it. Your wealth will never exceed the depth of your relationships. You can optimize your marketing. You can refine your product. You can master every sales technique ever invented. But if the people around you don't trust you deeply, consistently, over years, you'll always be starting over. You'll always be hunting instead of harvesting. You'll always be one bad quarter away from zero. But if you build trust, real trust, earn trust, trust that's been tested by time and proven by consistency, you'll never be alone in your ambitions. You'll have people who think of you before you think of yourself. You'll have a network that works while you sleep, that opens doors you didn't know existed, that brings you opportunities you could never have found on your own. That's not networking. That's not sales, that's not marketing, that's wealth, the real kind, the kind that compounds, the kind that lasts. Build it slowly, build it honestly, and never ever break the chain. If this made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and leave me your answer to this question in the comments. How many people in your life right now would vouch for you without hesitation, and what did you do specifically to earn that trust?